Three, two, one.
Welcome in. It's the Life in the Red podcast, and we are truly a band of nomads this week. I'm Parker. I'm at home. That's boring in the grand scheme of things. There's Sipple. He's at Scooters. And Baz, Chris Basnet, live from Minneapolis St. Paul International Airport en route. There it is. Look at that. The walkway. Is that like are those the Seagates, Baz?
Yeah, we're in the C concourse right now, the Delta concourse.
C concourse, flying Delta.
We're flying Delta.
Down to Minneapolis for basketball media days, men's and women's. Baz has to board in like 10 minutes, so we're going to rearrange our order here a little bit. We're going to jump right into this week's hot topic. We're going to give game predictions so Baz can get his in, and then Sipple and I will talk more football after a quick overview of hoops from Baz. So right into the hot topic of the week. Does what happens on the field Saturday between Nebraska and Michigan affect how you view progress in 2021 from the Nebraska football program? Sipple, go.
Yeah, we talk about this all the time. Baz has referred to it. You know, it seems like every single game is a referendum on the program. Nick Baugh today said, yeah, it's like a referendum followed by a town hall meeting, is Scott Frost program making progress or not? Should he survive the season or should he be fired? I mean, it's all very weighty, The one thing I would say, though, is it's sort of hard to deny progress. If you look at, you gotta have some poison and noise here. As long as if you look at a big topic this week, which was the 2-18 game and how outmatched Nebraska was compared to now, where I don't think anybody feels this is a mismatch. Isn't that progress right there? I mean, the only thing that would speak against progress is another Michigan blowout win. And I guess it's conceivable that could happen, but I don't. It's only conceivable to me is if Nebraska has colossal breakdowns in special teams. Go ahead, Baz. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think they could lose close and it could still be a referendum, because what if they lose close and it's just a comedy of errors, like it was at Michigan State. If it's a 3-point game,
that's a good point. That's
return or the offensive line falls back into its own habits and all those sorts of things. And you go, well, if they would have done this or if they wouldn't have had that holding penalty, then we're right back where we started. So I don't even think it needs to be a blowout for it to be a referendum on progress or anything like that. So I think it will be a close game. I think if you're picking a blowout here, you're crazy. But yeah, they've just got to continue what they did last week, and I don't think any of us expect Nebraska to have the production like it did last week against Northwestern, certainly on offense. But look, they're going to be in the game. Defense is going to give them a shot. The way Michigan plays, the way that Michigan wants to run the ball is going to keep that game close too, I think. So if Nebraska goes out, plays a clean game, loses, that's one thing. But if they go out, play a mistake-filled game, then I think you're right back where you started.
That's a good point, Baz.
Yeah, Baz, I think the thing that sort of builds on that is if that happens, if you lose a close game and you just make a bunch of mistakes and it's not clean and, sort of comedy of errors, like you say, the thing that's going to, I think the question that pops up then is like, what more do you need to get to a place where you can beat a top 25 team? Now, Michigan's not just a top 25 team. They're ranked number 9. They're undefeated. But they don't look, I guess on paper, like the defense is, probably more talented in the front 7 than Michigan State by a little bit. Their offensive line might be a little bit better.
They are. They're more talented than Michigan State.
But it looks, I think Michigan offensively looks similar to Michigan State. And so if you had every chance to win that game, if Nebraska's got a chance to win this game, then one of the steps in a program's progress is their ability to get over the hump and win a big game. We haven't seen that. We haven't seen that from Nebraska so far. I mean, if you were going to say what are the best wins of Scott Frost's tenure so far at Nebraska, it's probably a 9-6 win over Michigan State in the snow at Memorial Stadium in 2018, and then a win over a talented Penn State team that didn't have a win yet. last year, that was winless. And so, I think at this point, you're one of the marks of progress that you're looking for is a win against a really good team. And that's what Michigan is. Not insurmountable by any means. And then having said all that, it's not like if they lose this game 27-26, everything is lost and you can't point to anything that's better about the program. So, I think that there can be insight about progress, even if it's a close game. But sweeping conclusions in this industry, like in a lot of industries, are often not advised.
Yeah, it's interesting that win against Michigan State in 2018, to which you refer, that Michigan State team was 7-6. Penn State, yeah. What did Penn State finish last year? Not very good.
Yeah, 4-5 maybe. They got hot at the end of the year, 4-5.
Yeah, started 0-5, won their last 4.
Yeah, that's right.
This would clearly be Frost's biggest win. And yeah, you're right. There's definitely something to be said for this mindset of coming close now doesn't mean you got to get over it. You got to get over the hump. I mean, coming close, there's just not that much to be said for it. It doesn't mean, like you said, Parker, it doesn't mean that there's not progress in the program. Clearly there is. I mean, I think that's very evident, especially in personnel, because no longer are we saying Nebraska's overmatched or even outmatched talent-wise.
Yeah.
I do believe Michigan will be Parker, I think it's a significant step up from Michigan State defensively. I've watched Michigan now. I think their defensive front's much better than Michigan State.
Yeah.
Now, I agree with you on offense. I think it's a very similar offensive game. Yeah, so this is a huge test, but I'm going to try not to overreact either way, although a win would be monumental for the program.
So
try to overreact anyway, but it would be the biggest win in Scott Frost's tenure and potentially change the direction of the entire program.
Well, I'm not saying no. I would say it's the biggest.
No, I know.
It would
be.
I wouldn't say that it would necessarily change everything at a dime.
No.
It would be the biggest win of his tenure for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. They're calling my gate here, so we should probably do some predictions.
Call it, Baz.
Yeah, Baz.
I've gone back and forth so much. I think it'll be close. I think it'll be really close. I think Michigan wins a really, really close game, and not because Nebraska plays poorly. I just think that defensive front, it's going to be a lot to handle. Aiden Hutchinson's going to give Teddy Prohaska some problems, I think, up front. So give me the Wolverines in a close, low-scoring game. I'll say 24-21.
Okay, thank you, Bass. Safe travels to you.
Safe travels. What's the one thing you want to learn before we let you go? What's the one thing you want to learn in Indianapolis from Big Ten basketball media days?
Maybe just if Fred Hoiberg's any closer to a rotation. We kind of got an idea yesterday at Pro Day. We saw the top 10 guys. So if they're any closer to making that kind of decision, I bet I could probably tell you what the answer he's going to give is. But we'll see. We'll see what he says.
All right. Well, also try to investigate whether the shrimp cocktail at St. Elmo's is still as good as it was a couple of years ago.
Michael live on Twitter for the St. Elmo's shrimp cocktail tonight. I got an 8 p.m. Central reservation at St. Elmo's. So
let's go.
Let's
go.
Hey, it's my birthday. I'm going to treat myself.
Oh, happy birthday!
Hey, happy birthday, Baz.
Hey, thanks, guys.
45.
A young 45. Yes.
47.
It's not quite 78 like Sipple, but
I'm in my 70s.
It's actually 42. So
all right, happy birthday and enjoy the hell out of it.
All right, boys. We'll talk to you later.
All right, God bless
you.
God, Bass. How about Bass?
Traveling on his birthday, getting into the pod from the airport.
What a dude.
Going to St. Elmo's.
What a dude move.
That's a long day, and it will feel well worth it when his sinuses are clearing out as he gets into that shrimp cocktail at St. Elmo's.
Okay, continue. This is a gigantic game. It's funny how the world works. Everything moves really fast, but sometimes I have to stop and think, yeah, you know what? This is pretty big. It's going to feel big on that night too, because the crowd, which gets us to a subject. I think that home field is critical in this discussion. Critical.
Yeah.
But a lot of it's about what we talked about last week, which is the fans recognize that this is a good Nebraska defense, and they get behind it. That's something to get behind. I mean, and then I talked last week about how it's reciprocal, and you could feel it last week, and you may feel it more this week. You know?
Yeah, it was cool. One of the things, there was a lot about last week, a lot of the small stuff got sort of swept under the rug a little bit just because it was it was just such a sort of eye-popping performance with the final score, what it was. And then, Thunderstruck and the light show between the third and fourth quarter, I think that took up a lot of conversation. But I remember pretty distinctly, Nebraska went on offense first because Northwestern won the toss and deferred. And they went down and scored. They had a 70-yard play, and it was raucous, and the balloons went up right away and all that. But it was pretty loud. One of the louder moments of the night was the first time the defense came on the field, and the crowd's, reaction to a group that I think has really earned the trust for the most part of Nebraska fans, and that Nebraska fans have really come to appreciate. And they gave them a pretty good, they allowed 2 scoring opportunities and 1 touchdown, and they forced a turnover on the goal line on the other one, and Northwestern didn't sniff a scoring chance after that. So they definitely fed off the energy of the crowd. The guys said that, and man, it's going to be a live wire on Saturday night in that building this weekend.
Right, and it's worth pointing out that Michigan, there'll be a lot of Michigan players that haven't seen this thing because of last year there was no crowd. Most notably, Cade McNamara.
Yep.
Their quarterback he came on the scene last year during the COVID year where there were no crowds. Now this is going to be his first go round in this environment, in this sort of environment. And if Nebraska is able to bottle up that Michigan run to a significant degree and then put pressure on McNamara, that pressure along with the crowds can be a lot to handle. I mean, some guys react to it really well. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are plenty of guys who put their arms around it and they love it. Now, I've seen other guys come in to those situations and it clearly rattles. So I don't know what kind of guy McNamara would be. But I know this about McNamara. He's not wildly talented and he doesn't run the ball. So he's going to have to get it out and get it to receivers.
It's interesting. Last week against Wisconsin's really struggled offensively this year, but Wisconsin's got statistically, early in the season, the best run defense in the country. And Michigan, yeah, but if you go by yards per game allowed and also per carry, 1.6 yards per carry.
43 yards a game they allow rushing.
And Michigan tripled that yardage-wise. But when you look at it, it was 44 for 122 or 125.
44 for 112.
112. So 2.5 yards or less per
2.5 yards a carry. Yeah.
That's struggling to run the football against a really good run defense. And then Michigan, in that game, Michigan had 15 first downs. 15, pretty modest number. And before that, the week before that, against Rutgers, they didn't have an offensive first down in the second half. But here's what I like. They found a way to win that Rutgers game, even though they didn't play well in the second half. And they scored 38 points against Wisconsin because they forced 3 turnovers and controlled the game and had good special teams play. And so the ability to, they've only thrown the ball 95 times this season, and they were really grinding it out on the ground against Wisconsin. And yet they found a way to put 38 on the board against a really talented defense because they controlled the game. So it's that battle, I think, on Saturday night, it's going to feel like an old school Big Ten game, I think, because both of these teams think that their recipe to winning games runs through controlling the clock, controlling the ball, keeping its defense in good position, and then taking advantage when you get in the red zone. So it's, I think it's got a chance to be a really physical, low-scoring type of game, and that would be pretty intense at Memorial Stadium.
Oh yeah. There, you always look for X factors. Aiden Hutchinson might be Michigan's X factor, but I'd say Adrian Martinez gives Nebraska an X factor.
Yeah,
Michigan has not seen anything like Adrian Martinez this year. Any quarterback, you might say Noah Vedral, but I mean, come on. I mean, compare him athletically. Noah's a good quarterback, but no, I mean, I saw a Detroit writer say that to, kind of intimate that's a viable comparison. I wouldn't say it is, not because Noah doesn't have nearly the explosiveness that Adrian has, nor the size. I mean, Adrian's 6'2", 215, probably a little bit heavier than 215, and really can run. I mean, and he's really healthy too. And by the way, so is Nebraska, which is
extremely healthy. Yeah,
which is another sign. That's kind of a sign of progress, by the way. That 7 games in, you're not all beat up.
Yeah, definitely. I think we should come back to that in a minute, but I wanted to ask you, I'm sure you've been asked this on various platforms this week several times. What is your answer if I were to submit to you that perhaps big number 0 on offense can also be an X factor this week and beyond?
I'd say it's too early to tell on that. I'm not. I mean, I obviously I like that big running back picture, always have, but I'd have to see a little bit more of him. It's going to be a lot tougher. Front 7 for Michigan there's no comparison between Michigan's front 7 and Northwestern's. So I don't know.
Just that they put 7 players in the front 7 typically.
That's about it. So I don't know. Yant at the end of the day is a freshman, and I just have to see more, Parker. I just have to see more. I do like the way he hangs onto the ball, and I like his feet. Obviously, his size is alluring, but those two things, he's really mindful of ball protection, and he's got great feet for that side.
It's interesting, and this sort of, we saw on Saturday against Northwestern, we saw Jaquez Yant for the first meaningful reps of the season. He got 5 carries against Fordham. And we saw Oliver Martin back after missing 4 games. And so it's interesting to me, Simple, it sort of gets back to what you just touched on a minute ago. At the midpoint of the season, with 2 games now left before Nebraska gets an off week, they play Michigan, play Minnesota a week from Saturday, and then they've got the first 2 bye weeks coming up. They are adding players, basically. I mean, Brant Banks wasn't available. Brock Bando missed a couple games, sort of working his way back. But by and large, they lost Gabe Ervin earlier in the season. But by and large, that's 2 skill players that Nebraska added back into its repertoire rather than, losing guys over the first half of the season. And they could get Thomas Fidone down the stretch. I mean, it's been a pretty remarkable year health-wise. I mean, Gabe Ervin would say, yeah, great. What good did that do me? And Javen Wright would say the same thing. But by and large, it's pretty impressive where Nebraska's at from a health standpoint at this point in the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think that indicates. I mean, I think there's that indicates that there's good work being done in the weight room and in physical training and guys taking care of themselves. Luck enters into it, of course, but I never. I mean, I don't look at it totally as luck when a team stays healthy. It indicates that guys are taking care of themselves and that the off season was very productive. Which is, that Yant discussion is interesting. You heard it a lot. I occasionally have people say, hey, how come they're not playing Yant? They're missing out. Some of those people would say that, see what they're missing. Well, I mean, Scott explained it really well. I mean, if a guy is 30 pounds overweight going into fall camp and Scott says, we're not playing you till we feel you're ready, I think that's the right approach. And I think that's a sound way to do it with everybody. Because where it would bother me as a coach is commitment. It would indicate a lack of commitment to me. And I would almost take it personally. Like, you're on my team and you show up 30 pounds. I mean, do you not respect what we're doing here? So I think they took the right tack with him. And you heard a lot of criticism about why isn't Betts on the field earlier? Some of that came from my mouth. Or why isn't Manning playing? Well, now that you look at it, maybe the whole idea was let's put them on the field when they're ready to make plays, not when they're not ready to make plays, or we have to force it, or we have to create situations for them to make plays. That's a theory, and it gets down to a philosophical discussion. but I don't mind the philosophy of requiring players to be ready for everything. It doesn't bother me. I mean, I don't know why that's so bothersome to some people, but it's not bothersome to me.
It's interesting because we've seen it in several instances too, where, you know, like Wyatt Lever does not play as many snaps a receiver hasn't the last couple of weeks as he did at the beginning of the year. And some of that's because guys who have, I think it's fair to say, I mean, Wyatt's a really good athlete, but guys who have more raw ability have come on and have taken snaps and are playing more as the year goes on. And it got to a point with Teddy Prohaska at left tackle where he proved to the coaching staff that it was time to give him a shot, and they did. You know, same with
that evolved though, right? I mean,
yeah,
I bet that Teddy Prohaska on August 7th wasn't where he is now.
Right. You know? Exactly. And for a true freshman, a guy who just got to campus in January at a position like left tackle, I mean, it meant a lot. I mean, Teddy had to sort of get himself into a position where the coaching staff trusted him enough to use him in that jumbo tight end package. I mean, he was playing in the second and third quarter against Oklahoma. You know, that's not like, hey, let's just throw him out there. That was a game Nebraska had intentions of winning, you know, against a top 5 team in the country. So he's out there for a couple snaps, get a little time, and at the end of a couple of lopsided games before that, and suddenly you put enough in front of the coaching staff to say, hey, look, maybe this guy deserves a shot. And sure enough, now he's the starting left tackle. So it's evolved. There's certainly, occasionally there are cases where you could look at it and say, wow, you know, that guy, should he have been on the field earlier? But I think as it pertains to Yant and as it pertains to Teddy Prohaska for sure, and probably the receivers too, you just see less of it, I guess. It's probably, you got to earn your way. You want guys to earn their way quickly. If you're a coaching staff or if you're a fan, that's understandable. But, you know, sometimes you got to go prove that you deserve to be out there.
Yeah, and I also understand that coaches miss. They make wrong decisions on personnel. They're human, and I've seen it. I mean, I saw it with Joe Gans and Keller, the quarterback. I started the wrong guy back in that time period. It was evident, but for various reasons, coaches do make wrong decisions. But I also understand, like, I'll tell you, like a guy like Betts, see, he looks very ready to me now. And they put him out there now more because of his readiness. And if you put him out there when he's not ready, and he runs a wrong route, which he did against Purdue last year, and you give up an interception, that affects the team and it affects the kid and it affects the way the other kids look at it. So, I mean, in a sense, what a coach is doing is taking care of a player and saying, we're not putting you out there until you're ready. That's not necessarily punishment. You could also look at that as they're just taking care of the kid. We're not going to put you in a situation you're not ready for. And if you judge a player that way, that's not necessarily a negative. I mean, they're waiting for a kid to be ready to excel. I mean, that's another way to look at it.
Jacquez Yant it's not exactly your point, but it's close on Saturday when he said, you know, he said, I wasn't happy when the coaches told me that I wasn't going to play till I hit this weight, but he said, but they're paid to be coaches. And if that's what they think is best for me, if that's what they need for me, then it's my job to do it. And I thought that was a pretty, you know, it's a
really good reaction is what
it is. I mean, and you could say, well, it wouldn't have been a problem if he wouldn't have shown up 25 pounds overweight in the first place. And that's obviously fair. That would be a fair criticism, but it sounds like he handled it in a relatively mature way once he was in that situation.
Yeah, and it feels almost like a no-brainer when you think about it. If he showed up at 260, I mean, what do you do?
Yeah,
move him to guard. I mean, yeah, and I will see what that picture looks like. Man, if he gets 5 yards of pop against Michigan, I know he got more than that against Northwestern, but if he just goes 4 or 5 yards of pop against Michigan, then that conversation really gets real.
Speaking of conversations that could take off further, do you think we're talking about earning your way onto the field? Do you think that the option has earned its way onto the field in a more substantial way for Nebraska's offense?
I mean, we'll see. Now, what happens now is defenses will adjust more now that they're seeing it more. Michigan will probably, I mean, those guys are paid a lot of money to come up with answers to that sort of stuff. And Michigan will be mindful of it. We'll see. Well, it becomes a chess match at this point. Now that Nebraska's shown it more, teams will have to prepare more for it. And some guys will have some answers for it. So I guarantee Nebraska's coaches are probably anticipating that. But Parker, to me, it's sort of an equalizer. I mean, if your offensive line's struggling, which Nebraska's has, I mean, this isn't just simple talk. And I talked to Tom Osborne about it.
He knows about the option.
Yeah, and he says it definitely takes pressure off the offensive line because they don't have to hold their blocks as long. You know, you get your guys out on the perimeter and you get them in one-on-one situations, and that does take a little pressure off the offensive line. They still got to block, and there still has to be execution, but yeah, it does. And I think I don't know if that's why Nebraska's doing it, but that would make sense. It also makes sense from the standpoint of they have a quarterback that can do it. I mean, there's not a lot of teams in the nation that can say we have a quarterback that can run the option like Adrian Martinez. I wonder how many teams could even say it.
Yeah, who could do that and then also be dangerous, you know, throwing the ball down the field and doing other things besides just, you know, run and veer 55.
Yeah, you can't run the option with anybody. I mean,
right.
And Tom said Adrian could have ran it at any point, you know, starting in the 70s through the 80s through the 90s. He would have been a guy they would have recruited, a guy they would have played. Osborne happens to be a big fan of Martinez. And I can see why, because Austin Allen said something interesting the other day. He said Adrian runs the option well because he's a football player. I mean, and that's the kind of quarterback I like. I mean, Eric Crouch, Parker, Tommy Frazier, they were football players. Eric would have been a great safety. Frazier could have played running back, safety, whatever you asked. They're football players. And Adrian, I mean, I know it didn't necessarily come easily for him, that pitch, learning the pitch, you know, timing and the distance, all that. But it took some work. But, man, he looks smooth doing it now.
He does. I thought even they got good enough blocking on the perimeter, and Betts obviously has a world of ability. Northwestern didn't have the athleticism, or sort of surprisingly just seemed like they were out leveraged a lot on some of that option stuff. But the ball handling, I thought, on the first play Nebraska ran in the second half, just to give the look of the dive and then the smoothness of the pitch to Betts on the one that he took 83 yards. I think that it looked like a guy who's been doing it for a long time. You know, it didn't look like a gimmick. It looked like, hey, this is part of what they do.
Well, and you know, because you were an option quarterback in high school, you know that just doesn't happen. I mean, that had to be repped, I don't know how many times, but a lot. I mean, that kind of execution has to be repped and repped and repped and repped. And then you have to have a guy who has good hands, like a point guard. You know, I mean, some guys just have a knack for ball handling that others don't. And again, it just all goes back to Adrian's proficiency in a lot of different ways. And that play you're talking about, the pitch to Betts, was exquisite ball handling. I mean, you can't do that. It doesn't work without that. So it's really something kind of cool to watch.
It's going to be interesting to see how, with Aiden Hutchinson, you know, one of the games within the game is, I mean, the thing about option football is, you know, you can say you want to sort of try to help neutralize. You're not going to fully neutralize him on every snap, obviously, but you can maybe neutralize him a little bit by leaving him unblocked and making him the read man. But when you've got a guy who's that talented, you know, that's saying, okay, let's see if you can play both or feather it or make the play or, you know, force a fumble or whatever. And so I just think between the option stuff and the ability to read off of them and do all of that, and then also you see the way defenses for the most part have had to play Adrian this year, where it's soft 4-man rush. The teams don't blitz Nebraska a lot. they muddle rush a lot so that Adrian, doesn't have big open lanes to step up in the pocket and run through. It's going to be, I just think that's such an interesting chess match to see if they can scheme Hutchinson's impact on the game down a little bit, or if they have to devote extra resources to him a lot, that really hampers what you can do offensively, and especially over the course of possession after possession after possession, quarter after quarter. So to me, like I'm just fascinated to watch how Michigan moves him around, and then how Nebraska tries to. I guess there's sort of like aggressive ways you can try to neutralize him, and then there's protective ways you can try to neutralize them. And I'm very interested to see how the battle lines get drawn.
Well, and it's complicated by the fact that on the other edge,
they
have a guy named David Ojabo, is that how you pronounce it? Who's got 3.5 sacks and is 6'5", 250. I mean, it's not, there's no question who their star player is. It's Aiden Hutchinson. But on the other end, there's another guy, and that just complicates it further.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good one. Should we pick it?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's really hard. Go ahead.
I'm just like Baz. I've gone back and forth on it a lot. I've convinced myself I was gonna pick Michigan. Convinced myself I was gonna pick Nebraska. I went with a gut against Michigan State in the Michigan State week. I picked Nebraska. And for I said I just thought they'd find a way to win. And instead they found a way to lose,
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's residual from that, or if it's just that I think Michigan might be slightly better, not worlds better, but slightly better. I think it's really honestly pretty close to 50-50. I'm picking Michigan 24-23.
Okay, it is. It's close. Here's the thing I'm going to do. I'm going to pick Nebraska, and if you're picking Nebraska, it comes down to the fact you think Nebraska can hold down Michigan's running game to about like what Wisconsin did. And I think Nebraska's defense is as good as Wisconsin's. I don't know. I believe that. It's not the exact same type, but I think it's as good. Then your bet, if you're picking Nebraska like me, you're betting on Martinez being an X factor, and you're betting on that Nebraska will be competent in special teams and up front, competent, no colossal errors, or maybe you get away with one or something.
Yeah.
And then I think the other factor that I didn't mention is the crowd. I think Memorial Stadium at night is worth a point or two. And I think Adrian's skill level and the fact that he's healthy and the team's healthy is worth a point or two. And I think that could put Nebraska over. So I'll say, how about I say 24-21, 24-21. But I'm with you. It feels like a pick'em game.
It feels like we say this a lot. I mean, it's football, but one turnover, the team that turns it over twice might lose.
Yeah.
Or if there's only one in the game, the team that turns it over might lose. I mean, but if it's 2-1, it's just one of those games where it feels like the +1,
Yeah.
maybe makes a difference.
And I know people are going to say, well, yeah, look at Adrian's history. Well, I would counter with, look at McNamara's sort of lack of history in this kind of game. I mean, there's a lack of history that's also something you need to address, especially if he's throwing the ball downfield into a good secondary, with some heat. If Nebraska can come up with a couple picks, that can be a game changer, especially
go ahead, Sybil.
Especially with the way a couple of those guys run the ball after they get it. I mean, if Cam Taylor-Britt gets a pick, I mean, who knows where that's going? He can run. I mean, so that I think that's something to watch.
Yeah, definitely. I thought, that was the line on Peyton Thorne to draw it back to Michigan State again, was he's taking really good care of the ball and all of that, and he had 9 touchdowns and no turnovers, and then he threw a pick down the middle of the field on the first possession. They didn't get Holinsky much, but they had hands on the ball 3 or 4 times. I mean, it's I don't think Michigan's skill, I don't think the receivers blow you away. Like Jaden Reed, by the way, the Michigan State receiver, is leading the country in all-purpose yards. I mean, that's a really good player who got him on a flea flicker and on a punt return touchdown. I'm not sure if Michigan has a guy like that. They're okay. They've got some big play receivers, but if you're Nebraska's secondary, that veteran group, you're going into it thinking, hey, we can run with these guys.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They won't be intimidated. Cornelius Johnson's a good big receiver, 6'2", 205, big body. They got a guy named Roman Wilson that can hurt you, but they're not loaded at receiver. Those guys are good. Those guys I mentioned are good, but they're not. There's nobody that was going to scare Dante Williams.
Yeah. They lost Bellamy was their best receiver, and he got hurt earlier in the year. And so it's just, we could talk about it all afternoon. Simple. It's a fascinating game, and I'm excited about it. I think I said this morning on your radio. Maybe it's on your radio show or someone else. I don't know.
Yeah, we're on about 70 of them. So I can understand.
But I think outside of just the intrigue that surrounded Frost's first game, the one that got canceled because of lightning, and then there was a lot of hoopla in September in 2019 when game day came to town and it was Ohio State, and they announced the facility and all that. But I think that this is probably the most interested I've been in a game since I've been here.
Oh, wow, really?
And
wow.
I think right from Monday, I've been excited to get to the stadium. I don't care who wins and who loses, but it's going to be really fun. I'm really looking forward to.
Well, it's a big, and the other part we didn't even talk about, and again, we could talk all afternoon. We didn't even talk about this win would be big for Michigan too.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Harbaugh's under a fair amount of pressure. Harbaugh is making $4 million this year after making $8 million last year. You can really just boil it down to that.
Right. Yeah.
He took a 50% pay cut. There's some pressure in there. And by the way, their schedule gets rough at Penn State, at Michigan State, at Maryland. Of course, he has a big game against Ohio State, which I don't think he's come close to beating Ohio State. So there's a lot left. They need momentum. That Harbaugh what he doesn't need is a loss to Nebraska.
So I could hardly believe this, that last week when they won at Wisconsin, it's his 7th year. That was their first win under Harbaugh as an underdog.
Really interesting.
Yeah. So
interesting.
Yeah, it's a big one. It is a big one. Anything else for the good of the cause, Sipple? Anything you want to?
No, I'm gonna go right.
Right. What is it? Is that? Oh, you're columnist, so you. Write.
Yeah, we have to write sometimes, really quickly, but we have to do it.
Boss still there?
I think I haven't seen him leave. Yeah, Clark Grell is here between his assignments. He's at
Lincoln Journal-Star sports editor.
Yeah, at kind of our satellite post.
Satellite. Maybe I'll swing by in a little bit.
That'd be great. I'm right by the counter.
All right.
I will be right by the counter.
You will be right by the counter getting it. You get mango smoothie later or something.
I'll probably get a bacon ciabatta. Bacon ciabatta.
All right.
No, peach smoothie.
Baz is on his way to cover Big Ten basketball media days in Indianapolis. He'll have a ton of coverage on that. We got football coverage today, tomorrow, all week leading up to Saturday night, Nebraska, number 9 Michigan, Memorial Stadium, 6:30 p.m. It's an ABC game. A lot of you will be there. We'll have coverage for you. So keep it tuned to journalstar.com, huskerextra.com for all the latest. For Sipple, I'm Parker. Thank you for watching, listening, and please think about subscribing, journalstar.com/Huskers. Talk to you next week.